Okay. So let's start today. So we will start today with a lemma about additive category and exactness and the functor I will set functor. So let C be an additive category so the sequence so you take an exact sequence like that. So you take a sequence, and this sequence is exact if and only if you have a so if and only if for all objects you apply the application of some functor related to Hom space, Hom set. So you apply the functor depending on M, which will be about Hom space. So you apply this functor on the object and on the morphism. So this sequence is exact if and only if this is exact for all M, where is exact where this functor is the functor like that. So okay, so remark that this is a if and only if statement, but one way just saying that this functor is left exact in the sense defined last time. So one way means that the functor is left exact. And we have the same, so same lemma, so same lemma, and remark for contravariant functeur like that. So you take the Hom space, the Hom set, but you put M on the right. Okay. So maybe so this lemma, because sometimes it's better, is easier to prove the exactness at this level. So if you prove the exactness at this level for all M, then you get the exactness here. So it's a useful lemma. And so this lemma may be used to prove the following proposition. Okay. So I recall that we are in the summary part. We are just summarizing last semester course, so we don't provide the proof. We don't provide the proof of the statement in the summary part. But the summary part is almost finished. Then after the summary part, we will restart to provide all the details. So in the proof, all the detailed proof. So next proposition is about what? It's about the exactness of the duality functor, assuming some condition. So you take a multi-ring category, as we defined last time, and you assume that every object has left dual. So we said with left dual. Then the contravariant functor, the duality functor, like that, is exact. And same for right dual, with right dual. With right dual and this functor. So this statement was not so easy to prove. So I recall that the proof so last semester, the proof required 3 slides. So it's good to know that this proposition is not trivial. It's not so easy to prove. So if you want the details, you should go to the last semester material. It's the slide of session 16, last semester. Okay. Okay, so now we will need to make another recall from abelian category, and we will need to explain what is projective and injective object in an abelian category. So this is a quite fundamental notion. I tried to avoid them up to now, but for what follow, we cannot avoid. So I need to introduce this notion, or to recall, because we already introduced that last semester. Notion of projective, injective object in an abelian category. So yeah, most of what we will do today will be about projective and injective object, and then talk about the simplicity of the unit object. Let's see up to where we can go. So, okay. So the previous lemma said that, as I said, one way of the previous lemma is that this functor fm is left exact. So we already know, so remark, to introduce the notion of projective and injective objects, this will be about this functor fm and gm, the exactness of this functor, in fact, they are left exact, but so they are not, in general, they are not exact, they are just left exact. So remark. We already know that in an abelian category, si the functors fx, so the functor we defined just before, and gy like that, we know that these functors are left exact. They are left exact. In fact, you should be careful here. When I said here, same lemma, it is really left exact also here. It's not right exact, so you shouldn't be careful. Sometimes I'm not very clear. Sometimes I say same thing for right, same thing for left, and sometimes you just need to switch left and right, but here it's left and left. So both are left exact. So definition. So projective and injective object will be about that. So an object P in an abelian category is called projective if the functor fp defined just above functor fp is exact. So these functors are not in general. They are left exact, but not exact in general. This is the point of projective and injective object. So if the functor fp is exact, then the object p is called projective. And same thing for the other functor g. So an object I in an abelian category is called injective if if gi as above is exact. So more precise, if it is right exact, in fact, because we already know it is left exact. Okay, so now, of course, not every object are left or right, are projective or injective, but there is a procedure that may provide you a projective or an injective object from a given object. This is called the projective cover and the injective hull. So these two definitions are dual each other. And as I will note in a remark, such projective cover or injective hull don't always exist. So if it exists, so you have a definition of something and it can exist or not. So let X in C. So C always abelian category. So a projective cover of X is a projective object Px in C together. So you have an epimorphism from Px to X and kind of a universal property. Not a kind, and a universal property. So together with an epimorphism, so we write epi just for epimorphism. This is shorter because we will write a lot of epimorphism, monomorphism. So just epi, mono, to short version of that. So you have epimorphism, so P from P x to X. So epimorphism, so this is, we already defined epimorphism in some previous course this semester. But let's also recall that so the intuition for epimorphism is like it's surjective, but this is just intuition because it's not, we are not talking about sets. What the definition we gave is just the co-kernel is equal to 0. And you can think this as a projection where X is a quotient object of Px. So, okay. So which satisfy the universal property. So which is universal in the following sense. So in the following sense. So you have, so we already have this Px X and the morphism P. Now if you have another object P and another with an epimorphism G, then the universal property says that you must have a morphism H, an epimorphism H, so that this diagram commutes. So in other words, if there exists P projective, so P is projective, and G an epimorphism
Recording.
Okay. So you miss maybe a bit of what I said because what? Wait. Okay. So you miss a bit what I said. So I was here because of internet problem. So P, the projective cover, is universal in the sense that so you have that and that. So you have this epimorphism. But if you have another projective object and an epimorphism, then you should have an epimorphism H such that the diagram commute. This is what I said. And in other words, you can write like that. So if there exists another projective object, then you have an epimorphism and an epimorphism such that you have another H, the diagram commute. So what is written on the right is just another way to write what is written on the left. Okay, so this is for projective cover. Now, about so the dual definition for injective hull. So you will see this is more or less exactly the same, but you just reverse some. Some error. So dually. So maybe I should write like that. Dually. Error reversed. So you have definition. So I will write exactly the same thing, but by reversing the error. So you have an object in an abelian category, an injective hull. So I don't know how to pronounce that hull. An injective hull of X. So it's a way to make something, an injective object from X in some universal way. Yeah, so I forgot to write the remark. So wait, the remark about unique existence of and uniqueness of. So remark about projective cover. So if a projective cover exists, so it's not this. It may not always exist. Then, if it exists, then it is unique up to a unique, so up to isomorphism. There is no unique up to isomorphism. Maybe I missed that, but it does not matter. So if a projective cover exists, then it is unique up to isomorphism. And then, so dually for the injective. So an injective hull of X is an injective object. It's an injective object AIX in C together, so exactly as before, together with, and here you replace epimorphism by monomorphism. A monomorphism I from X to IX. And what is intuition for monomorphism? So monomorphism. So intuition should be something injective. It is defined formally before as kernel is 0. And you can see that as a sub-object. Okay, so as before, satisfy the universal property. So it is universal in the following sense. So as before. So we have this monomorphism. We have a monomorphism from X to Ix. I write in the other way. Monomorphism I. So assume you have another monomorphism. J from X to another injective object I. Then we must have a monomorphism H such that the diagram commutes. So in other words, if there exists an injective object and a morphism from X to I, a monomorphism, then we must have a monomorphism from Ix to I, monomorphism with the composition of H and I to be G. Okay. So so you have the same remark, same about unicity. So if an injective will exist, then it is unique. Same remark. So you have this remark, the same as this remark. Okay, so that's so now using this notion of injective and projective object, injective and projective cover, injective rule, we can generalize the notion of finite abelian category. In fact, we already defined the notion of finite abelian category, but in the semi-simple case. And in the semi-simple case, the semi-simple abelian category is finite if it has only finitely many simple objects up to isomorphism. So if you don't assume semi-simple, you can generalize this definition. But you need more. So the definition is a bit more long to state. So recall that a semi-simple, so semi-simple, we already defined, which means every object is a direct sum of finitely many simple objects, is a direct sum of finitely many simple objects. So maybe previously I forgot to specify that it's a direct sum of finitely many. Usually the direct sum in category we are always taking finite up to 0 object. Otherwise, you may need some analysis or topology. Can have trouble. So here it's a direct sum of finitely many simple objects. So we know finiteness for a semi-simple abelian. So we define semi-simple as abelian, so we don't need to rewrite abelian, but it is abelian. Category is called finite. So we already defined that, but I will redefine because we will provide a generalization if. So you have the assumption I, and for the non, so without assuming semi-simple, we will have 3 other assumptions. It has only finitely many simple objects up to isomorphism. Okay. So let us provide the general definition. And by that I mean without assuming, without semi-simple assumption. So let's provide this here. But we need to assume the category, so abelian, but we need also to be k-linear. So maybe in the semi-simple case, you don't need k-linear, but here at least we define it for k-linear. I don't know if there is a definition without the k-linearity, but it does not matter for our need. So a k-linear abelian category C is finite if so you have the you have the assumption I, which is above C above, so you have the same. So this one is this. I should change the color. Put in black. So this one and this one are the same. So okay, so this one is the same. Finitely many simple object up to isomorphism. You have a second assumption is so every object has finite length. Every object has finite length. This is automatically true in the semi-simple case because every object are direct sum of finitely many simple objects. So there must be a finite length. So the notion of finite length, let's recall that it is this notion require So this is about recall that it is about Jordan order sequence. So we defined that some previous course, some Jordan order sequence. Every object has finite length. Okay. Third assumption is the category the space are finite dimensional, and here that's why you need the K-linear to have a definition. Finite dimensional over K over the field. And last assumption, and this assumption, this is why we introduce projective and injective object. Last assumption, there are enough projective. And what does this mean? This means the following. Every object, every simple object has a projective cover. So as we said before, we defined the notion of projective cover, and we said that if it exists, it is unique. But it does not always exist. Enough projective means that it always exists for simple object. Every simple object has a projective cover. Okay, what time is it? Almost pause. So let's take the pause now. Take the pause. Pause. 16, 5, 16. Okay, so yeah, so we just defined the notion of finiteness without assuming a semi-simple. So now, let us state a proposition about finiteness. Yeah. So this proposition is saying that, in fact, every such finite K-linear abelian category can be modelized as category of module over a five-dimensional algebra over K. So a K linear abelian category C is finite if and only if it is equivalent to a category denoted A mod category of finite dimensional module over a finite dimensional K algebra A. So it's good to see that this proposition make category theory very concrete, because you have a purely abstract definition in category theory. In fact, it can be always modelized as something very concrete. Here, category of module over an algebra. But in fact, this algebra is not canonical. Such A is not canonical. More precisely, it is unique just up to Morita equivalence. Morita equivalence. Okay, so that was the end of session 16 of last semester. So now we can summarize last semester section 17, and in fact it will be very short, because last semester session 17 was completely dedicated to prove the proposition we will state now, because we will skip the proof. It will be short. Proposition. So what this proposition is about? Yeah, so you you start from a finite ring category with left dual, and then it must be a tensor category. Is a tensor category. A finite ring category with left dual is a tensor category. I see. So it's rigid. You have the rigidity. It's both left and right. So if you have left, then you must have right, if you assume finiteness. So proposition, a finite ring category C with left dual is a tensor category. So it is rigid. It is it has a left dual, right dual. It has right dual. Rigid means left and right, but we already know left. So okay. So in fact, the proof of that require a lot of time. Last semester, a full session was dedicated to prove that, but as usual, when a statement is important, or at least long to state, to prove, I provide often a ID of the proof. So the ID of the proof is to show that the functor the duality functor is essentially surjective. Which means, in other words, for all objects, so this functor is essentially surjective if there exists an object X prime such that the left dual of X prime is X. Okay. But, yeah. So this is the idea. You do that. Why we need to prove that? Because so it is enough to prove that because if A star equal B, then so if B is a left dual of if B is a left dual of A, then A is a right dual of B. And you have something essentially surjective. You play between left and right dual. So if you have something with left dual here, then we will get a right duals. So the main problem, the main point of the proof is to prove that. So the detailed the proof in details is in last semester, session 17, and they requiring 8 slides, so it's quite long because it's really detailed. 8 slides. And you can also see also the proposition 4 to 10 in the book. Okay. Okay, so proposition. So next proposition. What is the next proposition says that if you have an object, you have a projective object and an object with a left dual, you make the tensor product of the two and it is still projective. So it's useful. It's a useful tool to prove that something is projective. If you can model it as a tensor product of something projective and something left dual or something right dual, having left or having right dual. So let P be a projective object in multi-ring category. If X has a left, so you take an object X with a left dual or a right dual, same, then object, the tensor product, respectively, the tensor product in the other way, for right, is projective. And that's all for session 17. So summary, and we can go to session 18. Last semester, session 18. So last semester, session 18. So we need so we state the corollary of previous result. This corollary is about the unit object. So if the unit object is projective, if and only if the category is semi-simple. So before that, the multi-ring categories with left dual is semi-simple. So before that, let us state a preliminary proposition on abelian category, a locally finite abelian category is semi-simple if and only if all objects are projective. So if every object is projective, then this is the complete characterization of the fact that a locally finite abelian category is semi-simple. And then we can state the corollary I mentioned. So corollary. So if C is a multi-ring category with left dual, for example, this means, for example, e.g. multi-tensor. So, for example, a multi-tensor category. So, if you have a multi-ring category with left dual, for example, a multi-tensor category, then the unit object is a projective object if and only if the category is semi-simple. And this is a quite interesting result. So it's a corollary of previous proposition. And this is quite interesting in the following sense, because it's a categorical generalization of a well-known result in group theory. The categorical generalization of the notion of McKee theorem. So, remark, it extends How to write that? I'm not sure of how to write Mackey theorem. May like that. Mackey's theorem on finite group. Let me check. Mackey theorem. Anyway, I cannot access to that quickly, but it doesn't matter. So Mackey theorem. So this is an extension of Mackey theorem. So let's recall quickly what is Mackey theorem. So let Mackey theorem. Let G be a finite group. Take K, algebraically closed. Algebraically closed field. Then the category of representation, the usual one over K, is semi-simple. In fact, we already mentioned that before. If and only if the order of the group is non-zero over K. So if you have in positive characteristic, the order of the group can be 0 over a field of positive characteristic. If the characteristic divide the order of the group, then the order of the group will be 0. If the order of the group over the complex, then it will be 0 over K. Okay, so this is Mackey theorem. And why? Why the previous corollary extend Mackey theorem? Because the order of G is non-zero over K, if and only if the trivial representation K, so the field K is itself a representation, the trivial one. The trivial representation K, which is the unit of rep K, G, is projective. So that is why previous corollary extend Mackey theorem. So you see, this is good. This is nice. This is a nice corollary, and this is even nicer to see the group theoretical counterpart. In fact, this makes the sentence more intuitive. In fact, this is otherwise it's just a list of abstract sentences. You see, okay, it's just no sense, abstract nonsense or something like that. But this is strong. This is deep. Okay. So let us talk about the semi-simplicity of the unit object. So semi-simplicity of the unit object. Semi-simplicity of the unit object. So theorem. So what's this theorem about? Okay. So if you take a multi-ring category. Multi-ring category. And you consider the Hom space the Hom space of morphism between 1 and 1. What we call the end C. So this is a semi-simple algebra. So these are the structure of semi-simple algebra. So the proof of that require also proof required 4 slides. So it's not so easy. Last semester. So what I want to emphasize here is that we already know that it's a commutative. We already know that it's a commutative as a monoid. We already know that. So we said that early at the beginning of this semester. This is commutative. So it's a commutative semi-simple algebra. So by above it must be a direct sum of so it's a commutative semi-simple algebra. So it's a direct sum of trivial algebra, direct sum of K, direct sum of finitely many copies of the trivial one K. So you can write it as like that, direct sum, and you you put this P where Pi are called the primitive idempotent. So Pi with Pi primitive idempotent. So what primitive idempotent mean? So primitive idempotent means the following. So P in some ring, in general, P in some ring is called the primitive idempotent if so where is it? If so it's an idempotent is that P square equal P, and the PR is indecomposable. decomposable as R module. So this is a definition of what is a primitive idempotent. So you have primitive idempotent here. So you decompose this commutative algebra as a direct sum of one-dimensional algebra, and you realize it using this primitive idempotent here. Okay. And from this primitive idempotent, you get some specific object. So the image of this primitive idempotent will be called will be an object we will use now. So called 1i, the image of this such primitive idempotent. Then in fact, the unit is nothing but the direct sum of this 1i. So this is, as I want to say, as usual, for if you consider vector space. So like that. So lemma. So the unit object is the direct sum of that. What are the properties of this object 1i? You have several properties. For all I, 1i is indecomposable. Second properties. For all ij, 1i is isomorphic to 1j if and only if I equal j. Third property, it's about tensor product of two such objects is like that times the Kronecker symbol. So Kronecker symbol is here. I put it here to simplify this. This means that this is 0 if 1 is different from j, and 1 high if it's 1 equal j. Kronecker symbol. Kronecker symbol. So maybe it's maybe abuse of notation. It's clear. So and finally, last the right. So there are left and right dual, and they are the same itself. 1i is its own left and its own right dual. Okay. So now, using this this specific object, we can decompose multi-ring category into, in some sense, a matrix of ring category. So let me be more precise. So, in any multi-ring category C, the unit object, as we already said, the unit object 1 is isomorphic to a direct sum of pairwise non-isomorphic indecomposable. So I just summarize what we already know. Indecomposable object. And this object are the 1i. So that we know. Yeah, by the previous lemma. And yeah, it's just a consequence of you use that and use this proposal. And you see that one is isomorphic to a direct sum of pairwise non-isomorphic indecomposable object. Now, we want to decompose the multi-ring category using this specific object A1i. So let's consider this component Cij, 1i tensor defined as follow, 1i tensor C tensor 1j, where so the object of this new category are like that, 1i tensor X tensor 1j, X and C. And the morphism are the same. So identity of 1i tensor F tensor identity of 1j. F morphism in C. In C. So you have that. So you define this category like that, then you have 4 properties. First properties. These are components. So C is equal to the direct sum to one in C. So it's a direct sum of this, of that. So it's equal or equivalent. I'm not sure what should be equal. Let's write equal. Maybe it should be equivalent. And so there are the components like that. Maybe equal is okay. And if X indecomposable imply, so you take an indecomposable object, any indecomposable object should be in this component. Okay. So second property. So the second property will be how this component deal with tensor product. And that deal with the tensor product as we can expect, in fact, as for matrix. If you apply the tensor product functor of C to this sub category, to that, this will be this category if J equal to K. So I summarize it like that. That means this, so the tensor product functor map this direct product to that if J equal K, and to 0 if J is different from K. So it's a way to, it's an abuse of notation maybe. But abuse of notation. It is an abuse of notation. But it means exactly what it seems to mean. So, okay, so third property. If you take I equal j, you get a ring category. Otherwise, you just get category. Cij is just a category. It's not a ring category. It's not a monoidal category because you don't have the tensor product is not stable. If I is different from j, but if I equal j, the tensor product is stable on itself by the property 2. So the category Cii, this category, so is a ring category for I with unit 1i. And there it is a tensor category if C is multi-tensor. So C here is multi-ring, but if it is multi-tensor, then this II component are tensor category. And this justify the term multi. So it's a multi-ring category or multi-tensor category because it is made of several ring categories. In the diagonal, in fact. And out of the diagonal, it is just category. So find last property, if. So it's about how the right and left dual deal with this decomposition. So if X is in this component and has left dual, left or right dual Y, then this dual must be in the component GI. So here you see this look like a dual look like adjoint or something like that, adjoint of matrix. And in fact, the matrix analogy is more than an analogy because you can make example of multi-ring category from ring category using a kind of matrix functor. So the just a notation, the subcategories Cij are called component subcategory of C. Component subcategory. Not good. Category AIES. Okay. So example, as I said, we can provide example of multi-ring category from ring category using a kind of matrix functor. So example. So let D, what time is it? It's almost time. So this will be maybe the last point, is the last point of today. So let D be a ring category. Then this category, so we don't provide the details. You apply a kind of matrix functor, MND. Mn is a multi-ring category. With Cij isomorphic to T as category. Cii is isomorphic to T as ring category. So another so if D is a category vec, a trivial category vec, then Mn is a multi-tensor category. So here is an example of multi-tensor categories using a trivial category and this kind of matrix functor. Okay, so I guess we can stop here. So next time, so we will continue to talk about properties of the unit object, simple, yeah. So we'll continue this section next time. See you next time. Okay, so let's stop here.